I call to order the special closed session meeting of the Mayor and City Council at 1:43 p.m. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here, and thank you to everyone viewing remotely. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Here.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Present.
Councilmember Figueroa is not present at the moment. Mayor Pro Tem? Here. Councilmember Reynoso?
Here.
Councilmember Calvin?
Present.
Councilmember Alexander is not present at the moment. And Mayor Tran?
Here.
Thank you.
Moving on to public comments for the special closed session. Madam City Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do. Treasurer Ortiz, Enrique Camacho, Wendy and Phoenix Whitaker. Sorry, Wendy Whitaker, Christian Shaughnessy, Eric Marquez, and David Friedman.
Please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Dr. Treasurer Ortiz, Councilwoman-elect for the 7th Ward. So I'm a little disheartened to see whatever this item in that is not clearly stated on the agenda, appointment of a city manager, when we already have an interim city manager. And what I find extremely problematic over and over again is the instability and chaos. Now, I'm one of the most critical people of who you guys appoint as city manager. Like when you hired a city manager that had never worked in a city before, when you bought back an interim who did nothing for a year, when you hired a guy that had been fired for 4 times, and then you put in Rochelle Clayton after you fired the guy 7 months later. And Rochelle Clayton is the only city manager who's ever responded to emails. Even if she couldn't do anything, she still responded and said, "I received your email." She was able to finish navigating our way through the injunction. She has been able to, as you guys will do in the special meeting, help finally allocate millions of dollars that have sat unallocated for years coming out of COVID. She has been able to build a strong connection with the county, and they are happy to work with her. She's been building rapport with the community. And so I'm trying to figure out, what is it that we're doing? Why, when we finally have someone who is actually worthy of applause and thank yous, are we messing with this? Because we've done far worse. Is she perfect? No, but this lady's got almost 30 years of experience in city government, water, city management, HR, public works. I think, council, whatever this is, whatever is, or whoever is steering this ship, we got to take a step back, because there are real issues that truly Rochelle Clayton is addressing. And I don't want to see us go through another, who are you going to put? Who are you going to put here that's going to be able to stay where we are? This is 6 months in the making. And I, for one, want to work with Rochelle Clayton in these next coming days, in these next 4 years. I don't want to be a loser council with a new city manager every year. You guys have gone through 14, 6 or 7 in your own tenure. Chaos means that you don't have to progress. Instability means that we can keep shoving off all of the important priorities to the community. Please, just do what's right this time, which I know is not always the easiest course, but of all things, do not disrupt the management of the city of San Bernardino by doing anything other than supporting the person that you unanimously voted for, Rochelle Clayton.
Thank you, Councilmember-elect. Next speaker, please state your name.
My name is Enrique Camacho.
Wendy Whitaker. Phoenix Whitaker.
Yeah, we just want to say in regards to their city manager, we got a manager that's been working for the city for some time, been doing an excellent job, and doing everything that's necessary to move our city forward. So I don't understand why we need to change that city manager. Why bring somebody else that we don't know how that's going to work? So we feel, the 3 of us, that it's a mistake to not keep the interim city manager that we got right now. There's a lot to work with the city. lots of things that need to be done, lots of things that need to be addressed. And so bringing somebody else would be a mistake. So I don't know if Wendy wants to say anything else, but that's just my point of view.
I'm in full support of that notion. When you keep changing out people, there's no flow. The job can't get finished because one person has to try to figure out what the last person did and step forward. We want to keep continuity here. We want to keep the chaos gone, like Ms. Treasurer said. We want to keep what we have now, and that we're very supportive of that.
I'm also in support of that. My name is Phoenix Whitaker. I know it's not always easy to get along. I know sometimes it feels like high school. I know we don't always get along in our workplace. I don't always get along with my coworkers, but sometimes it's easier to fix the problem within. And I know that it takes patience and time, and that's a lot harder to deal with, but it's easier to do that than keep jumping from person to person to person to person. We need some stability, and we need some positive change in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Good afternoon, folks, brothers, sisters, members of the council or mayor. Christian T. Shaughnessy here, just coming here today to speak up in favor of Rochelle Clayton being made the permanent city manager. As was mentioned before, she has a lot of experience and has been shown by some emails that were released publicly. She and Cassandra Searcy have taken initiative on ensuring that our street outreach team here in the city of San Bernardino operate most efficiently and with great competence. And I think that's something that really means a lot to me, even as somebody that was just doing street outreach earlier today. So it's really appreciative. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Is this on? Oh, it is. I'm Eric Marquez, and I'm new, and I'm very excited to speak before all of you today. My opinions on Rochelle are she's done excellent work so far in her role, and the criticism on her is invalid, especially on the previous meeting where, for some reason, members of the city council argued that it was not her place to put something on the agenda when it seems to be at the city clerk's department to deal with that. And I just really like Rochelle, and also I'm a resident of Ward 4, and I hope to get to know you all very soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk?
That's it. That's all the public comment.
Thank you. Before we go to closed session, I do have some comments to make that we need to find some answers for. I do believe it's not just for myself as the mayor, but for the public and some of my council members on this dais. To my fellow city council and members of the public, I have questions that need to be addressed. As you recall, acting city manager Rochelle Clayton was scheduled to get a permanent contract on November 6, 2024, after a unanimous vote of 8-0 from closed session on October 2nd, 2024. But council decided to pull the approval of the contract. There was discussion on performance evaluation, and that was supposed to be scheduled and still pending to be scheduled. Then all of a sudden, we see ourselves here today.
Point of order.
I have the floor, council member. You're not recognized.
I'm not sure
I
this
have
statement
the
is
floor,
agendized.
council member. You're not recognized. I'm not done.
But this
I am presiding officer. I have the floor.
The Brown Act
I have the
governs.
floor. I
It's
have
not
the floor.
agendized.
Council member, you could turn off your mic. If I had the button, I would have turned off for you. We see ourselves here today with this item with no rhyme or reason. Questions that needs to be answered. I am not sure what we're doing today here and how this item got on the agenda. 2, there are 3 ways to put items on the agenda: the mayor, the city manager, or the majority of the city council and mayor. Is it okay for 4 council members to independently contact the city clerk to agendize an item? This suggests there were outside discussions, which would be improper under the Brown Act. Was there a formal vote taken to agendize this item on closed session? Did I miss something? What are we doing? Perhaps a council member who placed this item on the agenda, please provide us some insight as to what we are really doing here today. Are we going to have 2 acting city managers? If we are going to have 1 acting city manager, what current actions are being taken with the current acting city manager? Lastly, any action that we take, it seems to me, would be null and void because it hasn't been properly agendized in accordance to the Brown Act. Again, could a council member who placed this item on the agenda please elaborate and enlighten us and help us understand what are we really doing today? Mayor Pro Tem?
Now, hold on. My name is Mike Hartley, and I put in for a public, I put in a request to speak,
We did too.
and I'm a
Madam
little
City
bit
We
Clerk.
on
have a
the,
lot, it's all up, all our public comment is up there for this item.
so,
Our apologies. Madam City Clerk, could you please correct?
David Friedman.
well, hold
Gina.
on, David Freeman.
You can go first. I'm not.
Sorry, I
You
have
go
one
first.
for David Friedman. I do not have one for Mike Hartley.
Well, there,
I should have one for Georgia as well.
No, I'm sorry. I do
Gina
not have
can
those.
split her time with me. That's fine.
and I'm not splitting any time, because the last time I got split with a bunch of activists, and I'm not gonna, I'm here now, and I'm gonna speak my 3 frickin' minutes. Now, Rochelle Clayton, city manager, I don't think any of you guys have actually worked for the private sector, but I can tell you right now, when you start changing people, bosses, you lose morale. And this city has lost morale a long time ago. And why can't we keep a city manager? There's nothing wrong with Rochelle. In fact, normally I speak about frickin' code. She's the only one who's given me a goddamn meeting, all right? Now, Fred, if you want to sit there and say I don't have all the information, well, invite me to one of your secret squirrel meetings. Because I sure shit don't know what's going on, but I'm going to find out. Anytime there's millions of dollars, I worry about corruption. Half of you guys I know don't know shit about finance. Well, Clayton does. Hey,
Please let the.
you don't like my language, Fred? You from San Bernardino? Hey, I'm a brawler. Yeah. So Fred, why don't you shush for once? So I got to tell you, if anybody who should go, it's the city manager or the attorney. What does she do? She doesn't do squat. The city manager is trying to do something. And I guarantee you, if we let Rochelle go, I guarantee you, it's going to be clean house 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
My name is David Friedman. I'm going to tell you my personal experience with Rochelle. I'm in favor of you guys making her permanent city manager of this city. She's done a great job. As you know, I've been trying to get my P-bid for more than 5 years now, and Rochelle took a meeting with me. We talked about it, and it's been put on the back burner. But her priority of fixing the homeless in this community, I agree with her. And as a business with my own personal objectives to make happen, even I can see that she's right for this city and that she's putting the priorities in front of everything else. And I know some of you see that too, and others of you don't, but she needs to be hired. She's doing a great job. She actually cares about the city. She's not an outsider. She knows the city well, and she's very good at her job. So I think she's the perfect person to be here. And even though I'm not achieving my objectives immediately, the city comes first, the community comes first, and I think she understands that too, and she's doing what it takes to get this done. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Hi, sorry about the confusion. Thought I was signed up, but that's why I'm here. I'm here to voice my strong support for the acting city manager, Rochelle Clayton, to be appointed to the permanent position, and I'd like to explain why. First, Ms. Clayton has consistently demonstrated her commitment to engaging with the public. She is listening. I see her taking notes during meetings and shows genuine willingness to address the concerns of the residents. The level of attentiveness is something we have not always seen, and it's time to have a leader who prioritizes community voices. Second, her professionalism and courage are commendable. She's faced significant challenges and criticisms without wavering, showing us she has the strength to lead and maintain composure in difficult circumstances. Unlike others that have fallen into business-as-usual patterns, Ms. Clayton represents a break from the ineffective leadership of the past. She has not run away in spite of the controversies that have plagued the city and seems up for the challenge. And challenged is an understatement regarding the state of our city. Third, Ms. Clayton has shown a commitment to transparency and accountability, two qualities that are desperately needed in this city. Her actions reflect a vision we are desperate for, and she has earned the trust of many residents, including myself. Many in the community share my confidence in her ability to guide us towards a better future. We don't need a city manager who maintains the status quo or aligns with personal agendas. We need someone who is focused on moving this city forward. Ms. Clayton is proving to be our best option of doing just that. I urge you to seriously consider her leadership qualities and the trust she has earned from the public. Appointing Ms. Clayton as our permanent city manager would be a step in the right direction for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, any more public comments?
No, and just for the record, Mr. Hartley's speaker slip was submitted electronically past the deadline, and that's why we didn't have that on hand.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I just think it's important that the accusations about the the way this item was agendized needs to be explained, and I'd like it done either through the city attorney to see if we've done it legally and appropriately, or because it was put through the city clerk's office, maybe she could comment on the process and how we go about it and how it takes 4 people and how this one gained those 4 people to put this on legally and legitimately.
Madam City Clerk?
Hi, Mayor, Council, thank you. In the past, the city attorney has sent a memo to the city manager, former city manager, and myself on the 4 different ways that a special meeting can be called. One of those ways is for 4 separate, a majority of the council, 4 separate council members to contact me requesting a special meeting. Once there are 4, I am to notify the city council, the city manager, and the city council of the request for the special meeting, and that's what was done.
It's implied that 4 people simultaneously replied, but it was sent out by one person, blind copy to the entire council and mayor, if I'm not mistaken,
That is correct.
suggesting that this was something that that person wanted to put on the agenda. And if we, as a member of the body, agreed with that, we were to respond to you saying that I agree, I support putting this on the agenda. And so that was done with 4 people, and that's all it requires, correctly?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that. When it comes to the city manager, city clerk, city attorney, doesn't it require the majority of a mayor and city council?
To request a special meeting, it's only required.
Where does it say that?
It's the Brown Act, Mayor.
To request.
Councilmember Barra, I'm talking to the Madam City Clerk.
I'll defer to the
If
city
you'd like to
attorney.
be recognized, let me know. Thank you.
Mayor and council members, in a memo that was addressed to the council dated April 26, 2021, and this memo has been subsequently distributed from this date. I can go back and check when it was, but that's the date of the memo, April 26, 2021. We were asked to opine on what the process was for calling special meetings. There are 3 ways which the city clerk addressed. One of those ways is the majority of the city council can call for a special meeting, either by each separately contacting the city clerk or by asking for a special meeting. So that is the law as to calling the special meeting. You are correct, Mayor, that in order to take certain kinds of actions, you require a limited number of votes, but you don't need more votes just because the underlying issue requires it. So you can call a special meeting, you can have the discussion. If you do not have the required number of votes, then you don't have the required number of votes. I would like to say, I'm saying this cautiously, that we previously had a different council member call for a special meeting, and my understanding is it was handled in exactly the same way. My understanding is it was, and that there was no issue taken with how that was being handled. So Some of you know I had some really significant personal issues in the last week. I haven't been involved in this process because I just came back online this morning. So I don't know what happened in the last 2 days with this special meeting, but this is the memo that I sent out, and I'm advising you that the law allows you to call a special meeting, just like you tried to on the other item. Now, whether you can take action with 4 votes, that would not be legal. You would have to take action with 5 votes if it pertains to any of your appointees.
But Madam City Attorney, how it's agendized, the action, what happens with the current acting city manager, that is the key,
Yeah.
the
And
issue.
Because this involves a personnel issue, and because your current acting city manager actually has employment rights, because her real job is a deputy city manager. And I've mentioned this to several of you over and over again. Our acting city manager, her real job is the deputy city manager, and she enjoys personnel protections as a result of that. And I would encourage you not to discuss these issues in public. The proper place to discuss an employee that you are appointing is in closed session.
I would like to seek a motion from City Council to withdraw this item from closed session as it was not properly agendized.
Point of order.
Second.
Point of order.
I'll make the motion if you want a second.
Thank you. There's a motion, a second. Madam City Clerk, please call for the votes, please.
Where,
You're not recognized, council member. Please call for the votes, please, Madam City Clerk.
no, point of order, please.
Please
Point of
call
order.
for the votes.
Councilmember Sanchez?
No, it's a
Please call for
legal
the
matter.
votes. Council member, I did not recognize you. Please call for the votes.
No, but point of order. How are
Council
we
member,
taking- No, we cannot
Call
take a
for the
vote.
votes.
Legally, this is a violation of the Brown Act.
Just under
You
our
cannot take a
rules
vote on an
and
item that
Yes,
hasn't
we
been
can by the
agendized.
council. You can call for the
But
votes.
Mayor, may I just make a comment? Under your rules of parliamentary procedure, once a motion is made and seconded, there is time for conversation or debate unless there is a call
I am
for
the presiding
question.
officer. I'm calling for the votes, Madam City Attorney.
Okay, you've been
Thank you.
advised of the law.
Can we take a vote on this? It hasn't been agendized for open session. If the city attorney can opine on whether.
Council member, you're not recognized.
I
Madam
should be
City
allowed
Clerk?
to speak.
It is,
Yes, council member?
thank you.
Okay, so, City Attorney, can you please, Ms. City Attorney, can you please tell us if we are allowed to take a vote on this or discuss this matter if it hasn't been agendized for an open session discussion?
My understanding is the motion that's made is procedural to withdraw the issue. So are you asking about the underlying matter? I guess I need clarification on your question.
Yeah, so starting off with the mayor's statement at the beginning, is that allowed per the Brown Act, since discussion of the item in open session hasn't been agendized?
I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to say my legal advice again, the proper place for all of this conversation is in closed session. That's why it was noticed that way on the agenda pursuant to the Brown Act. That's where this conversation should take place whenever you're talking about a personnel matter, whether it regards any of your employees and your appointees. That's my legal opinion. I've been pretty consistent on that.
Now concerning, so this would fall, a vote to remove this item from closed session is a procedural matter that we can take without this being agendized?
Well, because it's a procedural matter, yes. So it's just like a motion to table, it's just like a motion to continue. Under the rules of parliamentary procedure, I believe that that's the motion that was made. So it's more of a procedural motion. So do you want to continue with this item in closed session as it was noticed? Or do you not want to go into closed session as this item was noticed? But I would like to say for the record, as a correction, I don't think it is fair or accurate to say that this was an improper noticing or that there's anything wrong with the way it was agendized on the agenda per the Brown Act.
Okay.
Thank you.
It might be one's opinion, but that is not, I don't share that opinion.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk?
Councilmember Sanchez?
Can you repeat the motion, please?
The motion is to withdraw the item from the closed session agenda.
You can come back to me, please.
Councilmember Ibarra?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem? Councilmember Reynoso?
Yes.
Councilmember Calvin?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I apologize to my councilmates. I'm trying to
get this clear in my mind, so I apologize. So we're trying to remove from closed session, this closed session, right?
Yes.
We're trying to remove C and D.
I'm sorry.
yellow one?
On your amended agenda, item A is a public employee appointment conversation that 4 members of the council called for a special
Okay.
meeting on. The question is whether you want to continue that item or not.
So to make sure so my vote is clear, we want to remove this from closed session. I'm just saying that the motion is want to remove from closed session. That's all I'm trying to say. Public employee. Nay.
Councilmember Sanchez?
No.
Okay, the motion fails 4-2.
Okay, we'll go into closed session at 2:09 PM. Hi, everyone. We're back from closed session. It is 3:36 PM. Madam City Attorney, is there anything to report from closed session?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public, I just have reportable action from the council based on a unanimous vote of those present, with Councilmember Figueroa absent. Earlier today, our acting city manager, Clayton, announced her interest in serving as the city's permanent city manager. To ensure fairness in an open recruitment process, she will continue to serve as the acting city manager until the council appoints a new acting city manager or an interim city manager to assist during this recruitment process. The City Council wants to assure the public that they want to work with the new council members as soon as possible to begin a recruitment process and to discuss appointment of an interim or acting city manager.
Thank
That's
you.
all reportable action we have.
Thank you so much. We will now move on to discussion. Navigation Center, award design services and purchase agreement with Mandeville Modular for site design, modular design and purchase of modular units, and award professional services agreement with CREDE, Construction Advisory for Development Management Services. Can we begin with staff's presentation?
Thank you, Mayor, members.
If I may, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We have public comment for the discussion.
Oh, we do.
Yes.
My apologies. Madam City Clerk for public comments.
Okay, Treasurer Ortiz, wait, just a second. Okay, Treasurer Ortiz, Christian Shaughnessy, Glenn Elfman, Georgia L., Kevin I'm sorry, the last name starts with an M, Kevin Mahaney, and Mike Hartley.
Well, I'll just hop into it. Hello again, folks. Hopefully we have a less exciting meeting today than we did the last one, right? But I just wanted to come on down and discuss the possible replacement of Hope the Mission as our city's street outreach team. Earlier today, a coworker and myself, we actually did our own street outreach, and we went to Paris Hill Park. I was inclined to go to Wildwood Park or some of the other parks, but my colleague, Diana Ramos, shout out to her from Open Arms. She's a very wonderful, hardworking human being. She had actually suggested we go to Paris Hill Park. I mean, just in case there are some folks still there following the cleanups. Unfortunately, not only were folks still there, but we encountered a 61-year-old client. I'll describe him by his initials, initials CG. He is very elderly. He was in excruciating pain. He was lying on the ground, exposed to the elements. He had remarked to us that for around a week that he had actually been around there. He had crawled around trying to get food, but his family members weren't able to help because they had given up on him. And we were able to call our firefighters, our wonderful firefighters, God bless you folks, to come on down, and a shout out to APS as well. But the gentleman was there, and it was something that was profoundly disturbing to us because The entire purpose, of course, of the cleanups and of all these efforts was to prevent something like that from happening. And another thing that disturbed us was the fact that he was not the only person there. There are still folks living in the hills of Paris Hill Park. And so I don't want to attack anybody individually. I don't want to attack anybody's personality, but if folks don't believe me, I encourage you to simply drive there after the meeting. There are still human beings living at Paris Hill Park in the hills. It's rather noticeable. And so with that being the case, addressing the emails that came out through public records requests, I definitely agree with the movement from Cassandra and from Rochelle Clayton to replace Hope the Mission. I do thank them for the good work they have done, but I definitely think it is time, especially with taxpayer dollars, to move on to something like the Salvation Army or some other entity to go ahead and operate instead. And I think that when we deal with these human beings, when we work with them, we have to do everything we can in the most efficient manner possible to get them out of those situations. And the gentleman reminded me of my father. He looks like him. He's around the same age. And he talked about how his family had essentially given up on him. And I often think about what would have happened if I wouldn't have listened to Diana, and if I would have just said, well, let's go to a different park either way, because that gentleman could have died. And so these are the stakes. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Mike Hartley. It's the first time I've ever got to spoke twice here. Unbelievable. The last council meeting, I was actually sort of in shock in what I was watching. I watched the city attorney act like Jim Penman, taking over with a lot of power. When I think of all the money we've spent to change our government, our city government, to a manager council, what I saw that last meeting, I thought, what has changed? I mean, the only thing that's actually changed is we've gone from the right side and Jim Penman to the left side and Carvalho. But everything's staying the same. Nothing's changing. We're not moving forward. We're going backwards. And I got to tell you, I just don't see a future for this city unless we change. And we need to change. And I've always been on code. I've always thought if we get a code enforcement department, we can change people's way, the way they keep their property up. I mean, it's just, to me, very, very bad. And you can see it. And how could you say you want a business to come here in this town and they drive around the residential areas and it's terrible. It's horrible. And if we don't change that, we don't have to worry about businesses coming here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm here again to address the Navigation Center and the alarming lack of progress on this project. It's been well over a year and a half, and yet nothing tangible has been done. Clearly, we haven't even started, and moving homeless around without real solutions is unacceptable. We demand honest monthly updates moving forward so the community is kept informed about where things are going or where they stand. I also urge you to gather feedback directly from homeless population to understand whether resources have been offered and what outcomes have resulted. Listening to their experiences could highlight what's working, what isn't, and what changes are needed to improve outreach. Hope the mission's performance has been inadequate from the start. They failed in outreach, wasted public money, and didn't even ensure their contact number was operational when the contract began. This was a failure we should have anticipated. I raised concerns about this costly contract back in June 7th of 2023 at the council meeting, where I also proposed a resolution to create a Homeless Solutions Commission. This commission should include local advocates with firsthand experience working with the homeless, and offering meaningful community input. Yet there has been no progress on either front. This city deserves better, and our approach must be comprehensive. Real outreach must also include the Department of Animal Services. We reportedly employ community outreach coordinators, yet their role in addressing the needs of community members with pets has been non-existent. Outreach cannot simply mean collecting pets to euthanize. Instead, we should include programs that help people and their pets stay together, intervention for those clearly overwhelmed with animals, and provide resources for animal care to help the transition into stable housing. Let's move past these missteps and get this done with accountability, transparency, and true community engagement. In closing, I want to remind you that many members cannot be here tonight because they are working or have other obligations at this hour. The opportunity for public participation through Zoom has been discontinued, and it's time to bring it back. I'm confident that if IT can manage muting and unmuting speakers to allow for meaningful engagement while maintaining order, let's make it easier for the community to have their voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Dr. Treasurer Ortiz, so one, I want to thank you guys for, I really want to thank Rochelle for not allowing that home key grant to go through, because we would have been locked in with Hope the Mission for 15 years, and they would have been allocated unrestricted $8.5 million. And so that's the hang up for Theodore, is that we didn't fraudulently take money from the state and the federal government. And I don't get that, because right now we have an opportunity to now receive $4.5 million and to go with an organization, the Salvation Army, which is truly producing great results, especially in the city of Redlands. 168 people off the streets in 1 year. And I see the allocation allows for the hiring of more staff. So what I really hope for, Rochelle, Council, is that this looks like the success stories in other cities. San Bernardino has this problem with trying to recreate the wheel when there are already working models out there, and Salvation Army is one of them. But in addition to these long-standing projects, we're talking 2-3 years for the Navigation Center, we need immediate shelter. All we did was push people out of Paris Hill Park and into the wash, into the backyards, and into the alleys. We have not truly addressed the housing problem. We have not addressed the public health component. We haven't addressed the mental health component, the drug addiction component, the children, the seniors. And so I know we are running out of time, which is historic for the city of San Bernardino to wait till the 13th hour after having these funds for 3 years. But we need to make sure that where reallocation can be put into emergency shelter services, that's what we need to do immediately, and especially in this coming year. Having people just roaming around isn't the solution, waiting for a navigation center for the next 2 or 3 years to come to fruition. So thank you guys for this. Thank you, Rochelle, for allowing us to be at this point. And thank you to Cassandra for calling out what Hope the Mission truly was, because any other pathway would have been disastrous for us, especially with the state of emergency. We have an awesome ability to do something with it, but we truly have to be proactive as a city, and we have not. Most cities have expended their funds, and we are just beginning our process. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, please state your name.
Good afternoon, City Council. Mayor, my name is Kevin Mahaney, and I work with the Family Assistance Program on the in our Highland Avenue office. And that work has included helping your homeless. Prior to coming to the city of San Bernardino, I was in the city of Victorville, and I had the pleasure of working with Cassandra on their homeless navigation center. I think you have got a great opportunity, since the city of Victorville has now had 1 full year to make their wellness center work. They've got a lot of lessons they can share with you. I think some of them are going to be financial as well, including how to provide health care, because a lot of the homeless have got a lot of health care needs that they have. I just want to applaud you for what you're trying to do, and I know it's brave. It's not going to completely solve your homeless issue. The city of Victorville, when I go up there, still has homeless people, but a large chunk of them are now in a shelter, getting treatment, and the city, I think, is even looking at trying to do like permanent supportive housing for those that are really, really sick that can't stay at that shelter forever. Thank you, and I wish you good luck.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Ellsman with Mission Communities. I just want to speak in favor of the item number 1 and the award of the contract with Mandeville Modular. I've been involved trying to see what opportunities and solutions could be brought upon for the Navigation Center, for the Hope Center. And in all candidness, as I've gotten a chance to understand this more fully and what their approach is and how they're going to do things, the money that's going to be saved, the timeline that I think they're going to be able to deliver this project on, I think this is a great opportunity, and I want to support that. And I also want to encourage you guys to move forward and buy additional land next to the Hope campus to expand other types of housing that obviously is going to be on more discussions and so forth. But I just wanted to lend a voice of support because I think this is going to work particularly in tandem with expanded land for additional housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk?
That is all for public comment.
Thank you. We will now go back to staff's presentation. William, or, yes, thank you.
So good evening, Mayor and City Council members. William Lampe, Senior Management Analyst for the City Manager's Office. And the ultimate purpose for the item before you today is to award 2 contracts, one for Mandeville Modular as the modular manufacturer, and another for Creed Construction Advisory as the Development Services Manager. And to begin the presentation, we'll just quickly recap very briefly what the Navigation Center is. It is an interim housing facility, so it will have shelter beds, a maximum capacity of up to 200 beds, but we would be phasing that in over time. 180 of those beds would be congregate beds, and 20 would be non-congregate. However, the congregate beds would still be in a facility design where the pony walls would be a little bit higher with privacy doors to be a little bit more non-congregate in spirit. The wraparound services would still be provided at the Navigation Center. This would be your case management, your behavioral health, document readiness, recuperative care, and so on. But more importantly, the main components of this project for the development have 3 major aspects. First, Mandeville Modular, they will be selected if council approves them as the modular manufacturer. And what Mandeville Modular will be doing, they will be the project designer, so they will do the official design of the site and the facility, and they will also manufacture the module units that will be delivered to the site. Creed Construction Advisory, they would be doing the development services. This is almost like your construction manager or your project manager. They're going to be the ones who are facilitating all the coordination between a general contractor, the modular manufacturer, all the permitting agencies, both with the city and exterior permitting agencies, such as the county fire, county health, water, sewer, and so on. And then to be awarded at a later date would be a general contractor. And the reason why a general contractor would need to be awarded at a later date is because you first need a design for how the site will be prepared, so that when you go out for bids, they know what they're bidding on, so they can actually provide you with an accurate bid. And we are currently going out for a request for qualifications to pre-qualify general contractors, and then once the construction documents are completed by Mandeville Modular, then we would do a request for bids using those construction documents as part of the bid package, so they know what they're bidding on. To provide an overview of how all the project components will kind of work together, so the development services, which would be Creed Construction Advisory, just on this little flow chart here, they're going to be basically managing the project at the construction and development level. So they'll be creating the timelines, the budget scheduling, they'll be auditing invoices, and they'll be doing all the labor compliance and regulatory compliance audits as well. Now, one of the big things that is a question is how is this whole thing going to unfold over time, and what are some of the deliverables, and when can we expect those deliverables? Because understandably, council is going to hold staff accountable, and the public are going to want to hold council accountable on when things will actually be provided and produced. So, as a preliminary tentative timeline, I'm going to walk through all the components. Now, this is just a tentative timeline because we haven't even awarded the contracts yet, and one of the first things you do after awarding the contracts, Creed Construction Advisory, Mandeville Modular, and the city, you'll have that pre-development and planning. That's when they're going to create the master schedule and the phasing plan for the entire project. And when that is completed, that will be shared with council, and it can be shared with the public as well. Once you have that schedule, you're now going to be designing all the construction documents, the design of the facility. We expect to have a final design by mid-February. And that, of course, can also be showcased at a council meeting and also presented or provided to council as well. Once those design documents, those construction documents have been created and established, then you're releasing a bid package for the general contractor. So you have a 30-day request for bids, and we expect to be back in council in April, and depending on how the timeline works out, it could be the first meeting in April or the second meeting in April to award a general contractor award. While that is happening in parallel or concurrently, we would also be getting the plan check process done for all the construction documents. Mandeville Modular would be procuring all the long lead items that have a long delivery time frame, as well as doing the state plan check reviews, because modular units require the state of California to do those plan checks. As we move into mid-April through June, after we have awarded a general contractor, they're going to start doing the site preparation work, because you can't just put a modular unit on unimproved land. You need to have the foundation, you need to have all of the utility infrastructure, you have to have all the grading done. So while Mandeville Modular will be constructing the module units, a general contractor will now be preparing the site for delivery of those modular units. We expect that the modular unit fabrication will result in modular units being prepared for delivery no later than June and likely sooner, because a lot of these things can happen in parallel or concurrently. As the modular units are being prepared for delivery, you're having the on-site construction taking place, and when the modular units are placed, the general contractor would now be doing all the landscaping, paving, irrigation, all the additional things. If you ever visit like a tract home site, you'll have your structure up, but there's still other grading and infrastructure work being taking place, like lighting, sidewalks, and so on. So there's still on-site construction work that will be taking place as the units have already been placed on the site. So we expect the modular units to be placed on the site beginning potentially in June, and then they will be installed and then fitted out. So that's all the interior finishings, because the general contractor will be doing the installation. Eventually, we expect to have the final inspections completed by the end of October or beginning of November, where we'd have a certificate of occupancy in November. And that's just a highly simplified overview of how this whole process is going to flow. Again, when we execute the contracts, if they're approved by the mayor and city council tonight, Creed Construction and Mandeville Modular, they will start to create that official master schedule and phasing plan. It'll be a lot more detailed than this, and that will be something that will be coming back to council to share and can be provided in communication forms. Now, the specifics with the contracts. So Creed or Mandeville Modular, they're located in Palmdale, California. They are specialists in steel construction for modular units. This contract has an award of $10 million, or just over $10 million, with a 15% contingency. And the reason for a 15% contingency over a 10% is it will allow the city to have more flexibility in the design process. The modular units are stackable, even after the fact, which means if you wanted to expand vertically a couple of years from now, let's say add transitional housing units on top, the roof structure of the modular units are also modular. They can be removed and new units can be placed on top. But to design those additional expansion options, you need additional design and engineering work for the foundation. And so that will increase some of the design and engineering costs. So a 15% contingency versus a 10% allows the city to explore some of those additional design considerations. Additionally, you could also expand the recuperative care units and have a recuperative care wing. And what a recuperative care unit is, that is where you have people who have been discharged from the hospital, but they still need medical services, and they still need a place to be, a shelter, to receive those medical services. Now, those recuperative care units, do require additional design for accessibility accommodations, wheelchairs, and other types of devices that require wider hallways, wider swinging doors, and so on. But it's a critical component because recuperative care facilities would allow the city and its operator to use what's called CalAIM reimbursements. That is where you can get reimbursed through basically a medical care, Medi-Cal type of program, and that would help offset the operating costs. So in Victorville, their true operating costs, or the full operating costs, is around $7 million a year. However, the city only pays around $3.5 million because you have those CalAIM reimbursements through the medical, that recuperative care process. For the manufacturing process, I'll just quickly go through these slides. The way it works is you have the steel framing fabrication. Those steel frames are delivered to Mandeville Modular. They actually have an entire supply on site. They assemble them into basically a modular skeleton, modular frame. Once you have that, you start installing all the insulation, all the panels. They'll do the interior finishing. Once that's done, they load up onto a transportation truck and deliver it to the site, which the general contractor will be preparing. Just because they're modular units, it does not mean they have to look plain and ugly. You can actually affix any type of facade to a modular unit. So if you want a Spanish style, a traditional style, or what have you, modern style, those can all be done. And so Mandeville Modular provided the following renderings as just conceptual examples of different ways it could look. In terms of the entire site facility, we'll be looking at other Hope campuses throughout the Southern California region. You have Hope on Lafayette here as design references because you still need those outdoor community spaces. So you have the various gardens, common spaces, places where they can feel comfortable and more at home. And so that would all be incorporated into the design that Mandeville Modular would be producing. Now, on the screen right now is what's called a preliminary mass study, and this is just a concept of a layout. The layout is not the actual layout, but what the mass study shows are the spatial requirements of the facility. So the lot utilization, how many buildings would actually need to be placed in order to accommodate a facility of this size. So the concept you see is a preliminary mass study. This is to give you an idea of the amount of buildings necessary to accommodate this facility as designed. The other contract that would be awarded tonight would be for Creed Construction Advisory. They're located in Irvine, California. Creed Construction Advisory, they were the project managers for the San Bernardino Justice Center just a few blocks away. So they did the construction management for that project. Creed Construction Advisory, their contract is just over $1 million. They'll be providing around 10 staff members to assist with doing all the invoicing, regulatory compliance monitoring, labor compliance monitoring, and the scheduling and coordination for this project. Most construction projects, the council awards, they also award a construction manager and inspector as well. And that is the service that Creed Construction Advisory will be providing. And one of the most important things about this particular award is that this project uses multiple layers of federal funds, and those federal funds have multiple layers of rules and requirements. It is not a general fund project, which has a lot less restrictions. It is a federal funded project, and you have a lot of labor compliance regulations that you must strictly adhere to and auditing requirements. And what Creed Construction Advisory has in their proposal, one of their staff members is a labor compliance and regulatory compliance specialist. And in the interview process, they provided the best answers that we were looking for in terms of making sure that the funds are being properly utilized for this project and that prevailing wage and payroll will be audited and adhered to per Davis-Bacon requirements and federal rules. So that is one of the critical components for this award right here. And so what Creed Construction will be doing, again, all that labor compliance, as well as basically being the construction manager for the project. Now, the next question is how does all pan out in terms of funding? All of these awards tonight would be ARPA funded, and it's going to be at a substantial ARPA savings as well. So when all is said and done, and these include contingencies, you'll have about $5.6 billion of ARPA funds remaining that could be allocated elsewhere. Now, the one thing you're not awarding tonight is the general contractor, but the general contractor would not need to be funded by ARPA because the mayor and city council have allocated plenty of other federal funds through the Community Development Block Grant Funds, or the CDBG funds, the Home ARP funds. We have some donations, and we also have a county HAP 3 grant of $808,000. So when you kind of go through all the funding in terms of like a funding matrix, here on the next slide, you can kind of see how everything will kind of tie together. All the other funding sources outside of the ARPA, you have over $8 million available for a general contractor. The request for bid package that the staff is putting together, we're expecting between $5 to $7 million, potentially $8 million there. We do have other funding sources, including PLHA funds, which is a state funding source that can also be used for construction if needed. But we will have at least $8.5 million available for a general contractor at a later date for that construction award. Now, the next question that council tends to have is with obligation and expenditure deadlines. So as we all know, the ARPA obligation deadline is coming up December of this year, December 31st of this year. The next most immediate deadline is a CDBG timeliness deadline. That's the end of April of every year. Timeliness deadline does not mean you have to expend all of your CDBG funds. It just means you cannot carry over 1.5 times your current annual allocation, which means if you were awarded $2 million in CDBG funds from the federal government, you could not carry over more than $3 million because you have previous years of allocations that could add up. And I can answer the question that I can hear some of you already thinking is, where are we with our CDBG timeliness and expenditures? We have about $1.2 million that we will need to expend by the end of April. Some of those projects would include all those baseball field park projects. Public Works just released bids today for those. You have the Navigation Center, which is $1.9 million. The police department received a programmatic award of over, I think, $350,000 for a quality of life team. So we have to spend down $1.2 million of CDBG by the end of April to meet our timeliness deadlines. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that puzzle, and staff will keep council, abreast on where we are as we go forward. The Housing Division is already going to be scheduling a meeting with their HUD representative in the next month or so to work out any additional plans, because CDBG also has a new proposed rule that would allow cities to carry over more than 1.5 times their annual allocation for transformational construction projects. Now, that has a different set of rules and requirements and reporting guidelines, but housing staff will be getting ahead of that proactively in the coming month or so. And those details could be shared with council at a later date once we have the results of that meeting. If you zoom out of the project funding, all the other deadlines are so far out, we don't anticipate them to be an issue, because the next issue in terms of a timeliness deadline would be in April of 2026 for CDBG. You have June 30th of 2025 for $808,000 for the HAP 3 through the county. It's a small amount of funds. We don't anticipate running into an issue there because a general contractor will be awarded well before then, and those funds have a lot less restrictions. ARPA has a 2-year expenditure deadline, so you don't have to worry about that with this project because it is a 12-month project. And then Home ARP, that expenditure deadline is off the chart. It's in June of 2030, so we don't anticipate that to be an issue. Now, with all that said and done, there are still a couple next steps that we'll come back to council with. So I understand that staff will be preparing a workshop to go over the operations and recuperative care for more questions on how the operating costs and fully flesh that out for council. There would most likely be a presentation on the final design once that becomes available. You'll have a contract award for a general contractor, a lead operator, and/or a recuperative care provider. And that RFP will be released this week, as well as a project completion and grand opening, hopefully November of 2025. Now, the next steps in terms of just housing and homelessness in its entirety, you now have to talk about transitional housing. And this is part of a longer-term plan because once you have people in a navigation center receiving services, they still need an exit strategy from the navigation center. So the next step towards addressing the city's homelessness population is to also have a transitional housing facility set up. Now, there's a couple different options that you can go with this, and one of them is with Palmfield Park, which is about 13 or so acres, and it's currently owned by the Water Department, and it is appraised at about $2.6 million. Now, you do have $5.6 million of ARPA funds remaining from the Navigation Center if the contracts are awarded tonight. So there's a couple different options. You could use some of the surplus, the ARPA surplus from tonight, to purchase Palmfield Park, and then the remaining amount to go for street segment repairs. So you kind of split it between the two. Now, one of the downfalls with using ARPA funds to purchase a property is that you lock in the use of that property for 20 years. So let's say there's a change or a pivot 5 or 10 years from now. That property's use has been locked in for 20 years. Restricted funds come with restrictions, and that property would have a restricted use for 20 years. The other option is to move all the ARPA surplus from this project into the street segment repairs, which is something that council has asked staff to produce previously. And then you could use general fund to purchase that property, where there would be no restrictions because we're just using basically our own personal check, our own personal wallet to purchase that property. So that would provide the city with more flexibility to make any changes to the type of use if things didn't pan out the way we anticipated today. And in a nutshell, that's the presentation. I try to keep it a little short because I know we were moving
Thank
to the
you.
next one.
I know we're taking time. Wonderful presentation, by the way. Thank you so much. Councilmember, do we have members of the council who wish to discuss? I believe Councilmember Ibarra, followed by Councilmember Sanchez, Calvin, and Alexander.
And I wanted to share, we do have Mandeville Modular here on site to answer any questions before we move on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm a very visual person. The first question I'm asking, how did you guys select the contracts that you're selecting? Was there an RFP issued? Because I know we have Connect Homes even closer than Mandeville Modular that also does the same kind of designs. From what I saw, it seemed the same. So I just wanted to see if there was an RFP that was released, and if they didn't respond to it, that would be interesting to know. And then I went to their website. It doesn't really give me images of the other projects they've done. I see on your report, it says here that they've done 4 other projects like this, and they weren't listed. Would you mind telling the public what 4 projects they worked on?
So to answer the first question about the RFP, yes, an RFP was released on September 19, 2024. There was only one response to the modular manufacturer RFP, and that was Mandeville Modular. Now, with regards to their other projects, in the backup, there is their proposal where they do show some renderings, but let me go to it very quickly.
So the ones that you showed, the 4 images back to back? Because on the website, I don't see their images much. So if this is going to be the congregate one, right, that they're working on, or they're doing non-congregate and congregate?
It is a hybrid of congregate and non-congregate.
So both. Okay, thank you. And then I do have one more question.
Would you like to ask, where was the RFP posted Where was it announced?
Planet Bids.
Planet Bids? Only on Planet Bids?
Yes, that's the city's official website for RFPs.
And then my last question, whenever you're ready, let me know.
So off the top of my head, I know the previous navigation center they designed was the one that was associated with Alex Trebek.
And I saw that design. That was a nice design, by the way. I just don't want it to be tossed out and if they didn't apply.
And Mandeville Modular is here if you would prefer the question to be answered by them so they can go over their history.
I mean, yeah, if they can tell us the other projects they worked on so I can have an idea, that'd be great.
Madam City Clerk, are we okay on time? I know we're past the 4 o'clock. Should we just finish this item then? Council, are you guys good to continue this item?
Yes, I just want to know what 4 projects
Okay,
they
thank
did
you.
already. Sorry. I didn't see them on your website. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for your time. So we've been doing a lot of projects for City of Los Angeles, Hope in Alvarado, 82-unit building, Hope in Lafayette, which was a congregate 19-bed unit, Hope in Western, which was for Councilman Herb Wesson. That was also a 14-bed congregate unit, Hope in Avalon, which was a transitional housing project, Raymer, which was with Alex Trebek. That's a design that you saw. That was a navigation center that we produced. Those are the most recent ones. We have others that we've done, but those are some of the most recent.
And those were all in LA County, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes, so we're going to finish this item, right? So I just, did city staff reach out to you at all? Made you aware of this RFP?
No, we were notified on Planet Bid.
You were notified on
Yes.
Planet Bids? Okay, all right, because it just concerns me. I mean, homelessness is a pandemic, or is an epidemic in our country, and there's a lot of shelters going up, and it does bother me that there was only one responsive bidder. So was there only one bidder at all, or just one qualified bidder?
Only one bidder.
Okay, all right. And we're going to be using ARPA money to purchase these modulars. These modulars, again, go contrary to what the council had approved 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago. We wanted to go with non-congregate, but we're kind of tight on time, so we're obligated into this modular congregate approach. So I will move to approve. No, I'll make the motion, and then we
Thank
can
you.
continue to have discussion.
Thank you,
And I just
Councilmember.
would like, in the interest of time, I know still questions, but we could also recess at the close of the questions and then come back at the close of the regular meeting to vote in the interest of time.
I think
Just-
we're wrapping up, so
Yes.
with a few more, then we should be good. Okay, Councilmember Calvin?
No, I haven't finished.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Yeah, I'd still like to make my motion and add this as to part of it. So I see here setting aside as part of item 1, one of the staff recommendations is that we reallocate the $5.6 million entirely to street segment repair. And that was actually my idea. I wanted to use all that so that I had heard what Councilmember Alexander had said, that we need an exit strategy. Using ARPA money on anything commits us to 20 years. So that was my thinking initially. And then I started to think that what Alexander and I had a conversation about today was that, yeah, a lot of times the city kicks the can down the road, and we're gonna end up having some great excuse why we can't purchase the Palm Field location. And at that point, it'll just die on the vine. What using ARPA money right now commits us to is it commits us to using this property for transitional housing. I know that the council unanimously voted on bringing back a budget overhaul for September 18th. That never came, and I don't think this council at all has been briefed on what our financials are up to this point. So we can go ahead and say, hey, we'll come up with $2 million or $2.5 million to buy Palm Field, but I don't know that we'll have the money. So, what was that? Yeah, but the thing is, were supposed to get a budget overhaul September 18th. We cut all our funding for street repairs, tree trimming, and streetlights. If you remember, those were 3 line items that were zeroed out in the budget. And we gave direction as a council to have that come back September 18th. It never did. I don't know if we will have the money before the end of April, while this appraisal for the property is still valid. So again, I came in with the full intention of voting to spend the $5.6 million on street segment repair. But the more I think of it, I think we need to force our own hand and make this commitment to the transitional housing. And as much as I'd like to say that we are going to solve this problem in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, it's not the case. As long as we have this, during this 20-year period, we will be able to use this as a transitional housing. So I will move to approve all staff recommendations with the exception, on discussion item 1, with the exception of using the entire $5.6 million for the street segment repair, and instead spend what is it? How much is the
Option
property?
1, are you referring to option 1? There's where it breaks down the transitional housing and street. That's
go back to
option
that.
1.
Someone go back to that, please.
To that slide. Option 2 is the entire money will go into streets. So,
Yeah, so
thank
instead
you.
go with option 1.
Okay,
And that
thank
will
you.
force the city to commit for the next 20 years to a transitional housing, and the
Thank you.
remaining balance to the street segment repair.
Thank you, Councilmember.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Calvin?
Thank you, Mayor Tran. It's amazing how we have such bright ideas when staff has already positioned this here as item option 1. And furthermore, what we have already been discussing, and at least I have for years, is that we must build some transitional housing. An exit plan is definitely, and matter of fact, you might need one more. It is to help community members gain stability. There are stages to that. And so I am very, very happy to leave the dais and see that this is actually coming to fruition. It definitely makes me feel good. The issue will then become, as you mentioned several times, William, in your presentation, keeping our feet to the fire and making sure that this does come to exactly that fruition and keeping us on the timeline. So the timelines are here, and the public also has the timelines, and the council most definitely has the timelines and should definitely be holding staff and making sure that we do not hit any potholes. But to divide this money is definitely the best plan that I could ever see, because community members in our streets are definitely needing this repair. And I think that I did see the asphalt maintenance program right there as well. So that then is going to fall in line that we will be able to be taking care of 2 major issues in our city, one being our streets needing the repair, the overhaul, and then creating housing for our unsheltered. So I did just have, well, actually, option 1 does take care of my question as far as that 20 years. But in that 20 years of that property, we don't have a design yet. We haven't looked at that yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how soon will that design, if the council approves tonight, how soon will that design take place and be brought forward? And then how long would you be looking at that property being developed?
We'll bring that back at the beginning of next year so that we can bring more options. So there is a proposal to the city to partner with another agency to provide some efficiency housing on that site. We have looked at some options with Mandeville, actually just through their proposal and information that they provided on some other transitional housing options. So we will gather more data and bring that back to the full council at the beginning of the year, and we'll have cost estimates and some funding options. So we will have to pull all of that data together, but we wanted to go forward with this step first in allocating at this point, since we're on a time constraint with the ARPA funding, the opportunity to go forward with that purchase, which is an allowable purchase. There are two components that will need to come as well, and that is a zone change on that land And there has been some planning commission discussions, and there's one more house cleaning item. It's technical, items that need to be taken care of. So we'll need to make sure we take those steps as well. But we want to bring all of that information back to the full council and have those discussions in a workshop setting.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just leave my next questions for Mr. Salinas when he comes up to the dais. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all of your efforts and your work on bringing this forward. And I have no doubt that you will definitely make sure that this project does get developed. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilmember Alexander, followed by Councilmember Figueroa.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. First of all, I'm concerned about the 15% contingency. Usually it's 10%, and now we're going to 15%. And I know you mentioned a little bit, but you're going to have to come a little clearer for this dais why we're going so far up.
So the original RFP had a more limited number of recuperative care units, and it was only for a single level. So depending on what would make the best sense in providing transitional housing as maybe a second or third level on top of the newly constructed navigation center, or expanding the recuperative care wing, that would require some additional design work, which would increase the cost beyond what the original RFP probably anticipated. Now, the next question you may have is what happens to the ARPA funds?
Nope, I'm not.
Okay.
My next question is, what is, unless it's in the backup or I don't see it, 10% to the 15%, is that going to change from the original design, right? Because we designed this, and like a lot of us here, we designed this with Alex Trebek, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? The council approved a design. We approved a design, and now it's a different design. So when I'm getting the contingency, and there was no 15% contingency fee back then. So you see where I'm coming from with this? We approved the design. Y'all unilaterally changed the design without council consent. And now we're at a 15% contingency. So I'm looking for why.
So for the design that's going to be changing are more of the structural engineering designs. So in terms of, let's say, the foundation, if you wanted to provide the site with future vertical expansion options, that requires additional engineering work to be designed into the foundation plans.
Why is that in the original cost? Because contingency means when you have an unexpected cost, right?
Well, because the original RFP did not have that as an additional contemplation. So the original RFP was just for a 200-unit navigation center interim housing unit facility.
So when you go right there, I appreciate you, William. So we did not have recuperative beds in here for our original RFP.
Not to the extent that we would like to maybe expand it into, so that we can then offset future operating costs by tapping more into CalAIM reimbursements.
Okay, and I understand recuperative care, and that's a great method, and that's something the city should do. Those recuperative beds are absolutely outstanding. They're outstanding, and we should do that. But once again, when you all change stuff, you need to let these 8 people up here know what you're changing. City manager's office. And it's not you. Great timeline. And also on option 1, which is the option I brought up, and I appreciate Councilmember Sanchez concurring on option 1, which I brought up. When is the RFP going to go out for the street repair? When is that going to go out, the RFP for that?
The street
if we approve this, how soon?
The street segment repair RFP was already released, and we have contracts ready to award.
For this new money?
For the reallocation of the surplus fund. So it's, I believe it's agenda item number 3
for
on the special meeting.
For the $2.9 million?
So
that's gone out already?
We had it geared up, anticipating council to go with option 2. Now, with council going with option 1, that would just be brought back where the contracts would just be changed. Instead of $5.6 million being split between 2 contracts, staff would come back with those same contracts, but now with a different amount at the next council meeting. So the RFP for that was already completed and already came back. The bids were already had a tentative award, not an official award, because that's done by council.
For $5.6 million?
Yes.
How could you do that when we didn't approve that?
So it was an RFP.
I got it.
So you didn't approve a contract. So council previously directed for staff to go back and try to release an RFP to using the ARPA funds for street segment repairs.
Okay. Okay. Mayor, that's.
And to
That's all.
just add, we could, if it was the council's desire, change the contingency, revert it back to the 10%. That's the standard. That's absolutely, this was just a staff recommendation for an option so that we'd have the option to expand the recuperative care services and the potential, if within regulations, to expand the foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Alexander. Councilmember Calvin, you had a follow-up?
I do. So if we choose, we would need to make that decision then, that we do not want to expand, that we would never want to expand that.
So city attorney just brought up, and I believe staff has vetted this, but I want to call it out in that if the expanded foundation was not included in the RFP, then ARPA funds could not be used for it. But I'm not certain exactly how that information was conveyed.
So the RFP didn't specify to what extent the foundation would need to be designed and engineered. It was just for the modular units.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments?
And actually, let me just specify. So the actual construction of the foundation, that would not be done by Mandeville Modular. They would just be doing the design, the engineering design of the foundation. The actual contract award to actually pour the foundation, that would be the general contractor. That would be part of the bid package that would go out in mid-February, after the construction documents, after the design documents have been completed by Mandeville Modular.
Thank you. Councilmember Figueroa?
Thank you. The word recuperative care has been thrown around here a couple of times. I was looking for it in the PowerPoint presentation, but I couldn't find it. It doesn't matter. It's not the point. And I'm not going to debate the merits of it, whether it's good or bad, as much as the cost of it, because in essence, what it is, it's a lower level, I guess, of medical care, or to prohibit the exacerbation of a person's illness due to homelessness. But this person would be essentially discharged from a hospital, doesn't meet the criteria to go into an LTAC or a skilled nursing facility, but still has a skilled need. My concern with that, of course, then becomes funding and who would be managing something like that, because it is a massive, like I was saying earlier, it's a massive undertaking. Because medical care is being provided, are we able to then bill insurance companies for any medical care?
So the answer to that,
I'm going to invite Cassandra up to provide a little more information as well.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Honorable Mayor and council members. So to answer your question, the reimbursement for recuperative care comes from a funding mechanism called CalAIM, and that's a derivative of Medi-Cal. And the benefit for CalAIM is that organizations, nonprofits, even city or county entities can now bill for services that are geared towards the unhoused, be it housing, being healthcare, be it supportive services. And by using CalAIM invoicing or enhanced care management invoicing, the services that will be provided on site at SB Hope Campus, the city's navigation center, the recuperative care will be reimbursable. And because the recuperative care is reimbursable, it will allow the overall operating cost of both the shelter component and the recuperative care component to be sliced half, or if not less than half. So to give you a prime example, the city of Victorville, they have an active recuperative care unit as part of their 170-bed wellness campus. Without recuperative care or CalAIM invoicing, the annual operating cost for that location would be $7 million. But with CalAIM reimbursable revenue that comes in, it brings the cost down to $3.5 million. In the same sense for our city, if we did not have recuperative care and all we had was shelter, there's no revenue, there's no program income for shelter care. But with recuperative care allowing us to address the needs of our unhoused community, we're going to be able to get that revenue. And with an experienced operator, that cost, or I'm sorry, the income that comes in is going to allow the city to move forward with 200 beds at roughly $3.5 to $3.8 million a year. Otherwise, we would be looking closer to $7 to $8 million in operational expenses.
Okay, thank you for that. And because we are essentially providing medical care, we can't then restrict it to San Bernardino resident individuals only. We would have to allow individuals from wherever the hospital is discharging on, but we can't be selective as far as only these individuals we will allow because of that. Or are we able to say we will only allow San Bernardino residents?
So we have to be careful with the word only, because our campus is going to be receiving funding from the state and federal governments, and there's certain restrictions that's applied where we can't just come right out and say we're only going to deal with our own residents. However, we can use the language that states that we're going to prioritize our residents. And we can also ask that the selected operator, when they enter into these agreements with local hospitals and HMOs, use that same language, meaning they're going to prioritize residents who either live in the city or work directly with hospitals that are within our city. For example, there's organizations that provide recuperative care, but they're bringing in people from Orange County or Riverside County. We can put that type of language in the MOU agreement so that we can prioritize our residents. And to give you a number, for example, we can say 80% of recuperative care patients would be San Bernardino residents, but we would still leave a window because we know there will be individuals that are in the hospitals that are not necessarily from our city that we can still facilitate. But the bulk of the beds will be preserved for our city.
Thank you. So and who would then kind of oversee it? I can't imagine that we would just create another department to manage this behemoth, really, because it's a lot of work.
Yes.
And so how would this be outsourced to somebody to oversee, manage, over, just to make sure there's no fraudulent care being provided or billed?
Yeah.
So that there's no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the city's housing division will still provide that level of oversight because the funding mechanisms that are going to be applied towards this campus are still connected with state and federal funds. So we'll have our own internal audits. But the key component here is that lead operator. That lead operator is going to structure these agreements so that it's outlined in terms of the services that are provided, in terms of making sure there's mechanisms in place in regards to surveys, and not just from the operator themselves, but from the public. There are systems that are put in place that's called ECMs, so that we can make sure that these are eligible expenses and there's no fraudulent activity, because there's billions of dollars that the state is pouring into this service. So there are checks and balances that will be in place on the side of the city, but we will manage this in-house with our operator.
That was all. Thank you so much. I appreciate the information. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Calvin, followed by Ibarra.
Ms. Searcy, if you could, or I don't know if you know the answer to, how many of the beds will be for recuperative care?
We would like to use 70 beds for recuperative care, and they'd be in a separate recuperative care wing.
And maybe it would be helpful to add some additional information as to, so then what does recuperative care actually mean? To what level of care would a unsheltered community member need?
Yeah, so specifically recuperative care, that's simply medical respite. And for our particular recuperative care model, we're following a social model. So what that means is that as individuals come to our facility and the doctor prescribes a discharge plan, that discharge plan could include a home health agency, it could include visiting nurses. Those entities will be allowed to come into the facility. With that said, the lead operator will still be responsible for having medical staff to maintain that level of oversight, but the actual direct care will be coming from home health agencies and visiting nurses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes, question for Mandible Modular. Since you've done these projects, how do you need the whole year to build them, or do you think you can do them faster? Because our city needs housing for our unhoused right now, as you've heard some comments.
Yeah, we have the flexibility to expedite We can't expedite past the state approvals. We can't expedite past your design approval. But in regards to the manufacturing process, we have the ability to expedite that process. We're one of few modular manufacturers that have an inventory that was reflected in the slide. So the number of units you need for this building, we already have on our site.
You have it available already?
It's
You just have to go through the whole permitting process
We just
then?
have to figure out the design, put it together, and then demise out the interior space as the design calls for.
Okay. That was my question. I wanted to make sure, because I mean, I wouldn't mind a 15% contingency if that would be like an incentive to, but yeah, it's
And
okay.
just to add, our incentive is to build this as quickly as possible. For us, we're a
Right.
production line, so once we have approvals, we push these things through because there's another project coming right behind it. So we will not delay. Our goal is to deliver ahead of the schedule that's been presented.
That'd be great. It's very much needed in our community, so thank you.
Yes.
And I think that was my only question. I just want to make sure I have all answered here, if I may. One more question, City Manager. I'm not sure if everybody in the public knows there was $17 million we returned to the state. Have we contacted the state about gaining that money back to help the Navigation Center, or it's lost?
We didn't return the money to the state. The application was for $24 million. The state did not respond for, I believe it was just over a year. They contacted the city and said that they don't have the $24 million, but they do have $17 million available if we could provide proof that we could provide the gap funding, the difference for the total project. Once we met with the state and we went over the project had significantly changed from the time of application. So we were told we had to resubmit another application. We did a side-by-side comparison. Cassandra and the team went through that process, provided that information to the state. Again, it was a significant change from the application, so they required another application. Through that process, our attorney, Albert Maldonado, reached out to the state multiple times to ask the question. We did not go through a procurement process for the operator, who was our co-applicant, Hope the Mission. We never went through a procurement process for that operator. Without a procurement process, you cannot qualify for ARPA funding. You cannot qualify for the specified funding also in Homekey. We did ask for guidance. They told us several times they would provide guidance and then came back and said, we're actually not going to provide you guidance. You have to review the CFR 200 regulations and all associated that were applicable to Homekey and make your own interpretation. And working with Albert Maldonado, again, multiple times he brought that was a concern, that we truly did not qualify for this funding because we never went through an RFP, we never went through a procurement process to partner with Hope the Mission, our co-applicant. We did ask the state, could we separate from Hope the Mission on the co-applicant? They initially said, yes, we believe you can, but let's consult. They came back and said, no, you cannot separate from Hope the Mission. So those reasons collectively meant that we were not qualified at the status of the project that we were presenting for the Homekey funds. Part two of that is, as we presented the updated project, it was traditional build because the original RFP came back at $29 million for modular and $24 million for a traditional stick build. Staff's recommendation was to go with the $24 million because we did not have the $29 million funding. Again, traditional stick build was less than modular, which was concerning because the standard now is to go with modular because it saves time and money. However, HCD returned the information to us that you could not go forward with the traditional stick build because their requirement was to go with modular. So if we would have gone with the original bid of modular, the $29 million, it would be a much larger gap funding. But going back to what the first point is that we never went through a procurement process for our co-applicant, which precluded us from being being eligible for that funding.
And that's even though they have run other shelters out there and they help with the application process. So for the public to know, we don't have another 17 million that could have been used towards the navigation center anymore. So.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. One comment, and I'm just having a problem with committing to 20 years for anything. I guess it's my age. But I'm not completely opposed to it, but I just think when we lock ourselves in, and I think over a period of time and with a $200 or $300 million budget, if we can't manage and cut some fat and find $2.5 million at some point in time, it's owned by the water department. Is it on the market to be sold?
It is not. We approached the water department for this purchase. Now, two items that I'd like to call out. One is I'm in agreement, staff is in agreement with the option to change the use of land in the future. Rental, low-income rentals would not be an option in the transitional housing.
Do I understand you to say that you go with option 2 then?
Correct.
So option 1 is locking us into 20 years, option 2 doesn't. Option 2, which is kind of where I'm leaning.
There are pros and cons to each.
Yeah.
For staff, the con is, again, the restricted use. If we wanted to expand to low-income housing, we would be precluded because it is specific to homeless shelter and transitional housing. The other point I wanted to make is that we do have a healthy capital reserve. We were at the last statement balance about 90 million in our capital fund, our capital improvement fund, so restricted reserve specific to our capital improvements. We could reallocate some of the existing identified projects to this purchase of 2.6 million.
Which is a fairly small percentage of the 90 million, did you say?
Correct.
And to me, that makes a little more sense. Cassandra, we were in Florida together. There were others with us. This recuperative care, we saw that neat modular thing that took care of medical issues. I don't have the name of it. I got the little video of it and got the business card on it. Does that play into this at all? I mean, have you, since our trip to Florida and we saw that, have you looked into that, or is that something that we should be looking into?
I think the recuperative care is a more comprehensive model because we'll actually have staff and equipment on site, whereas the model that we saw was it was a structure where people can go into a private room and have an individual consultation, but treatment was not provided on site, whereas recuperative care, the individual would actually receive treatment.
So they're not related really at all.
No.
However, that item that we looked at, I can't remember the name of it, but that was a pretty neat thing to have on site for someone to use just for some minor consultation with a live physician, correct?
Yes, correct. That would be very useful. However, I think with recuperative care, it's that model that you saw on steroids.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes, so we're talking here about a 15% contingency so that we can expand vertical expansion for a medical wing, essentially. Acting City Manager Clayton mentioned that we had to reject the $17 million partially because we couldn't explain out the gap stop or the funding gap. If we couldn't fund it then, how do you think we're going to fund an expansion of a medical wing? That's the first thing. Could we have used the model that the council approved unanimously on several occasions of non-congregate as an integrated non-congregate as well as medical? Couldn't we have done that? We could have done that.
Yes, that is what we're proposing, is to have a non-congregate.
But it's 20 beds, or how many? 70?
Up to 70.
But that requires us to double the cost of this facility. What the council approved originally would have had would have been all non-congregate that could have been overlaid with the medical. So now, in order to be able to bring in medical, we are going to have to expand vertical this facility.
No, we are actually proposing in the existing design 70 beds of recuperative care available for recuperative care. But to answer your first question, I did not state that we didn't have the gap funding. The gap funding was ARPA, which was also bound to the restriction of a procurement process.
So this is the issue I'm having here. Weren't we doing 100, how many non-congregate beds are we doing right now?
20,
How many congregate?
180.
All right, and then how many medical, right now, with the
So-
10 million?
Of that 180 congregate, 70 of them would be in a separate location in the congregate facility as recuperative care units. So they would still be congregate units, but the hallway design would be wider. The entrance to the congregate alcoves would be wider to facilitate wheelchairs. So all it is doing is you're taking your existing room design and making it somewhat like when you do an ADA accessibility design to an existing hotel room. You might add a couple bars, you might make the doors wider. So it's not like a whole new vertical expansion for the medical wing. It's just taking, we have 180 congregate units, and we'll just make the entrances wider, the hallway design to facilitate wheelchair access better, and all that does is essentially it increases a design component cost in terms of you now have to have more certified accessibility specialist design work being done. It has additional plan check review requirements most likely, so it just adds to the design cost in terms of the structural layout design.
So is that what we're doing now?
So that is what we would like to do. When you use that 15% contingency versus 10%, it allows staff to explore these type of additional structural layout design options.
So this would have to be at the outset. So this can't come later. This would have to be built into the design. So
Yes.
70, so now we're looking more like a possible 70 medical, 110 non-congregate, or sorry, congregate, and then 20 non-congregate. Is that what we're looking at now?
That would be one way you can look at it. But basically, of the 180 units, a certain number of those are ADA accessible. They're still either non-congregate or congregate, but some are just ADA accessible. And then of the remaining amount, 70 would be recuperative care accessible. That might be another way to look at it. It's just increasing the accessibility of those units.
Okay. The other thing was, I know there was mentions here of the $17 million that was rejected. This is a pass, so this is a pass-through of ARPA money, the home key funds. So now, I know, because I pulled the public records request, there was a mention of a waiver. We got $35 million for Lutheran Social Services. Did we go out to RFP for them?
No. And then to explain the waiver, so with home key, the state is a pass-through entity. Remember, pass-through is a sub-award. It's like when you're passing the torch, it's a pass-through. So with the state's pass-through funds, the state could build into the contract, which they did for Lutheran Social Services Project,
So
a
I'm going to stop you
non-competitive.
real quickly. We don't need to discuss this too much further. I'm just telling you, there was a waiver option, and the city manager's office never applied for that waiver. We should have applied for that waiver. HCD told us a waiver was available. We applied for that waiver.
Councilmember, can we stay focused on this item?
We
Which
applied for
city
that
manager?
waiver
Which
on-
city manager?
Council,
Which
let's
ci-
stay focused.
No,
There
the one
is,
before that.
No. So, okay, we'll stay
Councilmember,
focused
there's a
on this.
motion and a
yeah.
second. Let's, please, because
Okay.
we're on time. Like,
Okay,
we
all
were
right,
well
that's fine.
past our regular time for our normal meeting. Mayor Pro Tem, last comment, please.
Yeah, I'm going to make a substitute motion that we go with option 2, our option that for the street, so we're not locking ourselves into 20 million, 20 years. So I make that motion, but I also, to clarify on the recuperative, you're going to have 70, but they don't have to all be used for recuperative. In other words, anyone can stay in there.
correct. It's just like,
It's just a different configuration, a little bigger, a little wider doors or whatever, but you're still going to be able to, if you only need 20 of those, you'll fill the other 50 with other people that don't need that recuperative care.
exactly.
Yeah,
Just think
okay.
going to a hotel and they happen to give you a hotel room that's ADA accessible. Anyone can use it, but those ones would be
Right.
for ADA accessibility.
Okay.
Thank you. There's a substitute motion by Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
Oh, question, Mayor.
Yes.
William, when you were, I'm sorry, Madam City Manager, when you were speaking of the reserves, and I guess that you were referencing then the option 2, correct?
Correct.
And now we're not being tied in for the 20 years, that option 2. Speak about that reserve again one more time for me. I think that the community needs to hear that again, because that is what you're saying, is that we have this healthy reserve that we would be able to pull that $5.6 million from without,
2.6.
I'm sorry.
2.9.
I'm sorry, 2.9
2.6.
2.6 million.
2.65 for the Palm Field purchase.
for the Palm Field purchase.
Correct.
From the reserve.
Correct.
Is that what you're stating?
That's correct.
Healthy reserve.
Healthy reserve. Dedicated to capital. I was also just informed we have a 5 million unrestricted reserve as well. But the recommendation would be to use the capital reserve.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Is there a second to the substitute motion? Seeing none, we're going to go back to the original motion by Councilmember Sanchez, seconded by Councilmember Ibarra. Please call for the votes.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll support it.
Councilmember Reynoso?
Yes.
Councilmember Calvin?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes with Councilmember Figueroa voting in opposition.
Congratulations, Councilmember Alexander.
Thank you. All right. Council, we are still in the special meeting. We have how many more items left on here? Can we recess, or I just need staff to provide some guidance, how we can proceed?
We would recommend to recess at this time the special meeting and reconvene at the close of the regular meeting to continue the rest of the items.
Okay, thank you. So we will recess the special meeting and come back to the regular meeting, correct?
Mayor,
So
can we take like a 10-minute break before we go into?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we will recess, start at 4:57 PM, and we'll come back in 10 minutes to start the normal regular meeting
5:10.
at 5:10. Council, before you leave the dais, we will go into closed session when we come back in 10 minutes. We'll open for closed
You have
session
to
and then.
you have to open the regular meeting first.
Correct, open the regular meeting and then closed session, and then the agenda. All right, well, we are back to the special session meeting at 5:13 PM. The next item is item number 2, reallocation of ARPA funding to service contract for new homeless outreach provider. Could we begin with staff's presentation?
I'll keep this very brief. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is just to give an update. We have given some information already on the fact that the current contract with Hope the Mission for outreach services is going to be terminated later in December. This item is to recommend a reallocation of the ARPA funding to an updated contract with Salvation Army. This will not be voted on tonight as far as the contract. We just wanted to introduce it quickly during the workshop and let you know that it will be coming back on December 18th. These ARPA funds have already been awarded and under contract. It'll just be a reallocation to a new contract. Salvation Army during the RFP process was the second rated proposal, and working with the city attorney's office, we are able to reobligate the money and go forward with a contract still based on that RFP done in 2023. So this is just a receive and file to receive that update, and it'll be coming back at the next meeting.
So no vote is required? It's just
No
receive
vote is
file.
required
Okay,
tonight for this,
awesome.
just an update.
Any
Just
questions
receive and
from the
file.
council before we move on to the next item? Receive and file only, no votes required. Thank you. Next, item 3, agreements with Horizon Construction Company International Incorporated and Hardy and Harper Incorporated for asphalt maintenance and street segment repair services.
And I'd like to invite
Yes.
Ernesto up, Interim Parks Director, to provide the presentation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. In light of the option that was selected earlier, this is going to slightly change my presentation, but I think we can still find a viable alternative to finding a way to still fund the asphalt street segment maintenance program. And I want to start by first thanking Council for the previous funding that you have provided to this. This was actually a program, an initiative that was started by Council, I want to say about 2 summers ago, and it has reaped great dividends for the city. Specifically, when we repair streets and segments, it lowers the amount of pothole claims that the city gets. And it also saves us on material, and it also helps us to not be out there dealing with so many potholes. These past 2 seasons, we've had an incredible amount of potholes, primarily due to the unseasonable rainy weather that we've had. 2 years ago, we had 28,000 requests that came in, and this year we had a record-breaking 35,000 CRMs that came in for pothole repairs. I can only imagine how much worse it would have been if the street segment program wasn't in place. I think most of you have probably had requests from residents to repair certain streets, and they'll tell you, look, this is beyond pothole patching. The street is really deteriorated. We keep calling your crews to come out, and basically they're filling the potholes, but it's not making a difference. So this program has been very beneficial. I think you've noticed that in some particular streets, like the ones over by the Target on Orange Show and East Street. West Hill and Acacia was another street that was beyond traditional pothole patching repairs, and there's been numerous other streets. So again, I wanted to thank the council for your previous efforts. I also wanted to provide a little bit more background before I get into some of the bullet points on the next slide, specifically as they relate to the funding that this program has received in the past. When we first started the program, it really just started with about $450,000, and even with that amount, we were able to do some good to repair, those streets that are dilapidated, that are just beyond that traditional pothole patching, and it made a difference. I believe the next summer, council added more funding to it and added about $2 million to it. That went very far in our efforts, and that's where we had the bulk of the streets and large segments that we were able to repair. Let me go to the next slide. So let me begin with a real quick reminder and a project overview of this program. Again, this program expedites the repair of small streets in segments which would otherwise experience much longer wait times waiting, for example, a full street rehabilitation or for a CIP project. The bottom line on this is there are some streets that are still awaiting to be placed on a CIP project, and that can take several years to occur. When we use this program, we're actually able to go out there and repair these smaller streets or segments, obviously in a much quicker fashion. We do grind and overlay for them, so it's not like we're just going there and slurry sealing them. We do a grind and overlay, which means that the street will last a little bit longer. It is not a complete rehabilitation as engineering would do, but it nonetheless helps to prevent those potholes from resurfacing for at least, I'm going to say, 6 to 7 years. And we specifically target high CRM areas. In other words, those areas where we have a high number of potholes, where we have a high number of CRMs that come in. Some of the work and maintenance activities will include obviously repairing severely deteriorated intersections. We will perform large segments that are at least 10 feet by 10 feet in size citywide. And again, we will repair small streets in neighborhoods and sometimes in intersections or perhaps even in arterials. The impacts that we project from this are that we would have a 30 to 40% reduction in pothole requests. This obviously will result in a reduction of pothole claims that will come in to the city. And again, there would be some visual impacts to this. You're making the streets beautiful, it brings in investment. We're able to make things look a bit more aesthetically pleasing even with these streets. The funding that we've had for this, as I mentioned, was $450 the first year, then it went up to $2.45 million. The reason that it's $2.45 million is because we did have the $450 that was annually being programmed for the program. And again, this is where, because of the option that was selected earlier, it's no longer going to be a proposed $5.8 million, and you're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to try to do some math here a little later in my discussion to try to figure out what that new proposed amount would be so that we can potentially get it approved tonight. So I'll ask for your forgiveness in advance. I'm sure that one of the questions that you're thinking about, how do you select these streets? How do you go about that? So the first criteria that we use is that all of these streets must not be on a CIP list or a CIP project, nor are they scheduled for it in the near future. And that is simply because we do not want to duplicate effort. Once we pass that threshold, this is essentially how we prioritize this. Any streets that are immediate hazards to motorists is going to receive basically the first priority. After that, high volume of CRMs, where you're getting quite a bit amounts of complaints about potholes or deterioration. Next, we would look at high traffic volume intersections or our economic corridors. After that, we would look at schools and crosswalks, but I will emphasize something about schools and crosswalks, which is essentially if there are any hazards present, those will immediately be bumped up to a first priority. We do consider ward equity so that we can essentially divide the amount of streets that we work on throughout the year. However, in some instances, you're simply going to have some wards that have streets that are far more deteriorated than others, and that would be a consideration as well, and that would obviously be a conversation to have with council as well. And then finally, parking lots and some of the access roads, because those are important, and at times we may think that it's a parking lot. What's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal because we have quite a bit of visitors to our parks, and we want to make sure that they're not hitting potholes or hitting ruts or deep sinkholes in those parking lots. So that's essentially it in a nutshell as far as how this program will work. It's been very efficient for us. It's been very effective. It's had a great impact, and again, it reduces primarily the amount of pothole repairs that we do throughout the city, but it also creates a street that has been rehabilitated in a way to where it'll last us a good 6 to 7 years versus waiting for a while for a CIP project. Let me emphasize one more thing. This is a maintenance project, and we do work with our engineering division to make sure that we're not working on any streets that they might be working on in the near future. So as far as the specific recommendation that we had initially was because we had an assumption that the 5.6 in ARPA was going to be awarded to us with an additional $250,000 in our previously allocated ARPA funds that we had from the Violence Intervention Program, bringing the total to about $5.8 million. And what we were intending to do was to split this contract among the two lowest bidders because there was so much work that was going to happen. So we basically split that amount evenly. But in light of the selection of the first option, what we are going to recommend tonight is that we go with the lowest bidder, which was Horizon Construction Company, and basically go with the amount of $2.927608, which I think would be an amount that would be reasonable and would still allow that additional funding from the option one to continue. And so at this point, if you have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them.
Yes, so I think I can probably salvage the total contract amount for $5,855,215. So we had allocated half that to the purchase acquisition of the Palm Field for the transitional housing. We have $5 million in capital reserves, unrestricted capital reserves. We have $90 million in in the capital fund. A lot of that money is being held up and just sitting in a bank somewhere because we leveraged that with state and federal grant funding to complete a project. Now, one in the hand is worth two in the bush. We can use a minuscule, a fraction of that amount, of that 90 million in capital. We can use 2,927,607 from that capital reserve, that unrestricted capital reserve, so that we can grant the total amount of $5,855,215. Because we can do that right now. That contract was put out to bid, and we're able to do that. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I've seen a serious drop in complaints of our streets, because that's $5 million that'll be spent within the next less than 12 months to repave everything. Or we can just keep it in the bank and wait to use that money when we can leverage it with state and federal funds for big projects. Or we can spend that money right now, and everybody here knows streets in our city are riddled with potholes. We know that with the last budget, street repairs were gutted. This goes a long way of clawing back that money so that we can spend it out on the streets. So my motion will be to basically approve staff recommendation with the exception that instead of using the 2.9 million in ARPA funds, that we use the 2.9 million in the capital reserve.
So I think the only question I would have to that, and I would have to defer to our legal, would be that when we solicited this, we solicited with the specific requirement that it would be through ARPA, but I'm not sure if that's going to be a big deal or not. It's not, so, okay.
So that we got to have the cake and eat it too. So I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Councilmember Calvin, followed by Councilmember Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ernesto. We appreciate you in all your capacities and different hats that you wear for us here at the City of San Bernardino. I wanted to clarify something first. So you said that the streets could not be scheduled for a project? Is that what you said? Did I misunderstand?
No, it's not necessarily that. We have so many streets that are on our CIP list. And some streets do not receive that same level of priority simply because we're probably concentrating, or not probably, we're concentrating on main arterial roads, streets that have more high traffic volume. And unfortunately what happens with that is that sometimes some of those secondary roads, or maybe there are some areas that just require a large segment to be repaired, that will not necessarily qualify for a CIP program. So rather than having those streets wait quite a while, this program helps to repair those. And I want to emphasize this again. This is a maintenance and repair program. When engineering goes out, they will basically do what we call a curb to gutter. Everything basically gets repaired. This doesn't do that. This essentially just repairs the street, even though it may be almost like a street rehabilitation of sorts. So this is why we're able to move much more quicker with this. And then again, and I've said this in other forums, no offense to engineering, but their process will take a little bit will take a little bit longer because they have to do the geotechnicals and some additional things that we don't necessarily have to do when,
and more
when we're doing
expensive,
maintenance.
a lot more expensive.
Councilmember. Thank you. Councilmember Calvin, sorry about that.
So in the list that you provided us, high traffic areas, high CRM areas, schools and crosswalks, ward equity. Is that the order of which you will be pulling these streets from?
That is the order, but I will emphasize that if there's, as an example, school crossings or an intersection that might actually have a hazard, that automatically becomes basically priority one. But we're trying to limit accidents. We're trying to limit those claims that may come to the city because someone messes up their suspension hitting these potholes that keep repeating themselves. I can tell you that I drive the city and I know where all the streets that need a lot of help. I know that there is a pavement management plan that is, or program that is coming, and that will also be very, very helpful. But And again, this is just from going out in the field and seeing. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see where those streets that need a lot of attention are in the city. There are streets in southeast San Bernardino, essentially. Foisey Street is an example of a street that is literally down to the gravel. It's not a very large street. It's essentially in a neighborhood that's tucked away where the Amazon warehouses are at. But it is literally down to the subgrade, and it is literally dirt, and we shouldn't have a street like that in the city. Unfortunately, that's not a street that's going to necessarily make it into a CIP program right away when you have all of these other streets that have a lot more traffic volume. I know there are some streets over on Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Macy off of State Street and University. Those streets literally have grass growing on them, as an example. This is a type of program that would be able to go out there and do those repairs without going through a lengthy CIP process.
So when will our maintenance program, our software that we have acquired, right, when will that be interacting with what we're being presented with tonight, this repair service program?
I'll defer to Public Works.
Thank you.
We basically tag team because we're both still Public Works. The payment management plan is expected to be completed sometime in March or April of this year. I was hoping to have a update to the council as far as what they're doing in the segment areas of the city that they've already done their assessment on, but it is on track for them to complete sometime in March or April.
That's wonderful. Now, the last category that you listed was ward equity. And you did just mention several streets that are in Ward 6. And I think that it's imperative that we talk about ward equity. Because and even though that street may not be a highly traveled street, but yet it has not been paved in 40 years. So how will ward equity, by the time that we get down to this list, become something that is still yet a priority for you all when we're deciding which streets to pave?
So this amount that we're getting will go a long way in ensuring that we have ward equity. I have a list, unfortunately, because of the fast nature of what we were doing here today, I wasn't able to provide that list. I actually do have copies of it, and what we've done is we've gone ahead and listed all the streets that we would intend to repair with this $5.8 million, and that includes a full breakdown of which streets we've selected per ward, and we've been equal with that amount going forward. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you for that. And so going forward, will you be providing counsel, will the city manager's office be providing counsel with the information of what streets are, so that we can put that out, that can be placed out, now we won't be here, but so that we can put that information out into the community, so once again, the very same reason that we acquired the paving management system, that community will know exactly when their street is due to get paved?
Yes, ma'am. I can actually provide you that list right now. I would have to make sure that I've made enough copies to where I think we would be able to just simply provide them back so that the public can have access to that, but I can certainly provide you that list today.
So it's on a list, but
Yes.
does that list have a date of when it's going to get paved?
It won't have a specific date, but it would, if this gets approved tonight, we were looking at within the next year for these streets to be essentially paved.
Okay,
if that
thank you
makes
very
sense.
much.
Sure.
Yes, it does. Thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate your list, but I don't know. You said you drive the streets, and like you said, there has been some inequity over the years. Certain wards got paved and other wards didn't. But as a representative of 7th, I would like to see that list, to see if it actually corresponds to what I know of every street in the 7th Ward. You know what I mean? Or my council members or the mayor's office, they would like to see that. I'm sure they would want to see that list to see if that's actually the worst streets in our wards, because I would definitely like to see that. And on your maintenance list, does that include mediums? Because there's a medium in my ward that you probably know already, that I think you already been out there, the medium on Valencia between 30th and Highland, that you guys that needs attention. Does that pavement plan include mediums?
So if the median is an asphalt median, we certainly could incorporate that into this type of contract. That's not the intent of the program. We could potentially look at a median rehabilitation program and solicit for that or go out for bid for something like that and look at it from that perspective. But certainly we can use this particular type of contract with the special clauses that we have for them to do any type of asphalt work. But again, I'd have to emphasize that it would have to be an asphalt median, and I don't believe that that particular one is.
Okay, but it does include, it can include mediums.
Yes, right.
Okay, and I've probably asked you this a million times, so I'm going to ask you again about alleys, because I have quite a few alleys that are in disrepair, and why doesn't that include alleys?
And alleys, unfortunately, are because of the amount of streets that we have in the city and the condition that they're in, alleys tend to be our lower priority. In some instances, we use different types of methods to repair alleys. We have actually used concrete. I know sometimes we just basically put base in those alleys to essentially prevent the potholes or the sinkholes that are in those areas. But alleys are a low priority, unfortunately. We could, again, realistically use this as well, but I think that would have to be a further discussion that we would have to have, whether do we really want to fix an alley when you have some streets that are riddled with potholes and are in desperate need of repair.
And I hear you and I understand you, but if you see some of these alleys, that's the way people get into their homes. That's where their garages are. That's how they get in, out of, and traverse their homes. And those alleys, I can show you pictures because I have them on my phone, are way worse than the streets because they have been neglected for eons. So just to say, well, they're low priority, they're not to those people who get in and out of their homes where their garages are in alleys. Does that make sense?
I completely understand, yes.
So you're like, it's still low priority, right? Because that's what the smile
I'll
is
take
for.
another $2 million and we'll take care of all your alleys.
Thank you, Ernesto.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Ibarra, followed by Councilmember Calvin.
I just want to commend you, Ernesto. This is the second time you step up as an interim for our city, and that's something commendable. Every work you do has been extraordinary, especially with the street repairs. I myself have seen, Mr. Lynn, I have seen Muscopiabi partially fixed. I know we're still waiting on that project to go through, but just the fact that you guys are out there looking at the streets, that's something that we were lacking before with the leadership. We were having people just at their desks doing studies and plans and asking us for money to do studies, but never actually going out there and putting the streets to be repaired. And I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing, Ernesto. Thank you. Just wanted to know.
Thank you. Councilmember Calvin?
Yes, earlier when William was at the table and he was talking about, I believe, the contractors that would be chosen due to the fact that we're using ARPA funds, that they be businesses that provide Davis-Bacon wages. Same thing will apply here.
The federal requirements were part of their maintenance services agreement, and when we did the bid solicitation, it was clearly listed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a motion? I believe Councilmember Sanchez, did you motion?
Yes, I made a motion to go with staff recommendation with the exception of replace the, I'm not going to give the exact number, it takes too long, but the $2.9 million that was going to be ARPA, replace that with the $2.9 million from capital reserve.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem? Yes. Councilmember Reynoso?
Yes.
Councilmember Calvin?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And the last item, item number 4, yes, round of applause for that. Streets in our city getting paved. Number 4, issuance of a purchase order with Transwest Truck Center LLC for 2 graffiti abatement trucks. Staff's presentation.
Can I just make a motion to approve?
There's a motion to approve.
Second.
There's a second. Any other comments? Seeing none, call for the vote.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem? Yes. Councilmember Reynoso?
Yes.
Councilmember Calvin?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, City Council. We will now adjourn the special session meeting at 5:39 p.m. and we're going to recess for 5 minutes to come back to open the open session.